Hello, my dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Europa Rediviva. Today, I'd like to talk about a worrying tendency in Europe, which is the fact that in several European countries, the authorities tend to regard a sizable part of their citizenry, perhaps even the majority part of their citizenry, as enemies. More specifically, they conflate them with the Russians. This trend started from something more realistic, so societies that actually do have half their population to be Russian, like the Baltic states. Uh, Estonia, Latvia have a quite sizable proportion of ethnic Russians, around 40%, and if you count also those that have assimilated to some extent, then you have the majority of the population being Russian speaking or ethnically Russian. And when the Baltic states proclaimed their independence in 1991 and reobtained their statehood, they decided not to grant citizenship to the descendants of the, Soviet, mostly Russian inhabitants of those lands that had been settled there during the Soviet Union. Well, for politically understandable purposes, because they would have definitely skewed the political process in the favor of greater ties to Russia rather than greater ties to the West. So they made these ethno-states, and they did not grant citizenship to the Russians living there. They just granted them residence permits and the possibility to naturalize, but through learning the language, which I can imagine it's not an easy endeavor to learn Latvian or to learn Estonian. So the bulk of these people remained non-citizens until today, even though they are, even though these countries are members of the European Union. These non-citizens are permanent residents, and when Ukraine started embarking on its current path, so after 2014, it started a crackdown against what was the majority of its population, so the people who had voted for Yanukovych, for the Party of Regions, and who had generally maintained the pro-Russian stance in Ukraine. They were the majority of the population. Their political will had been overturned through the American-funded coup d'etat in 2014, and ever since then the minority, the pro-Ukrainian radical minority, came to power, and it essentially deemed the views of the majority to be disinformation and propaganda of the enemy. So they essentially took every manifestation of the majority of the people of the country, which are the Russian speakers and the Russian ethnics, to be somehow related to the enemy, to be the enemy within, but a sizable enemy, so big that it is the majority. And they had to develop all sorts of repressive tools, banning the language of the majority of the population, banning any kind of political representation for them, so outright banning of the political parties that they would have voted for. So first the Party of the Regions was banned, then Platform for Life, or how it was called, of Medvedchuk, was banned, and so on. Anatoly Shari's party. Anyway, there were many parties that were the expression of Russian speakers that were banned. And when Zelensky was appointed into office, when Zelensky won the presidential election, Zelensky spoke Russian during the campaign. His entire film Sluga Narodu was in Russian. He learned Ukrainian as a second language, and I think he improved on it in office ever since he became president. But he was from the Russian East, and he was a Russian speaker. He would attend New Year's Eve parties in Moscow and be an entertainer there together with Vladimir Solovyov. It's quite a transformation that he underwent ever since he became president, because he had to Ukrainianize himself, even though he was elected, especially because he wanted to implement the Minsk Accords and to essentially bring peace and avoid the war. But Ukraine as a state functions in this regard. The Russian language is officially banned, even though it is the language of the majority of its citizens, and any kind of expression from the majority part of the population is suppressed, be it media, be it political parties, influencers, whatever. Then they have assassination websites, as I've said before. There's Mirodvorets, there's also Chesno. Chesno is a very interesting one. I'm sure there are many. Chesno is an assassination website officially financed by the National Endowment for Democracy. And I'm ashamed to admit, as a Dutch citizen, also by the Kingdom of the Netherlands, through Matra Cup, through the Dutch Embassy in Kiev. It is also financing Chesno, and Chesno has this assassination list. It has a better interface than Mirodvorets. You can filter through professions, so you can filter judges, priests, members of banned political parties, which are like tens, like dozens of political parties, law enforcement officers. So they have a huge list of traitors, and they ordered by profession, by occupation, media, singers, whatever, including, as I said, law enforcement officials and people from the judicial power, so judges. And there is the very friendly, very user-friendly button, turn in a traitor, right next to the NED logo, the National Endowment for Democracy. Very good use of American taxpayers' money. And people there turn in what they consider to be traitors to the enemy, so expressions of the will of the Russian-speaking part of the country and of the Russian-leaning population. And even though, of course, if you believe in democracy, then the political expression of Ukraine should have been the one that was expressed by the majority through elections, not the one expressed by the United States through a coup d'etat, but, well, it is what it is. Then Moldova, in the past elections, managed to ban quite a number of opposition parties, alleging that they were pro-Kremlin, so essentially being pro-Russian is sufficient to have you banned from the elections in Moldova. But Moldova is not in the European Union. It is also in this post-Soviet space. You don't have much to expect from there. The only problem is there are now European Union countries that have embarked on this specific model. So if Moldova banned the majority of the Russian language media and of opposition media in general, and banned the majority of the pro-Russian political parties, this is not exactly a feature. I would say perhaps it's a bug. It's something that has to do with crisis that this country is undergoing, having a breakaway region and having a conflict at the border. But this is definitely not a governance model that should be emulated. However, this is not what authorities in several European Union countries decided. So, because of this incessant propaganda financed by the United States in Europe, countries like Moldova or like Ukraine are given as example for best practices in terms of governance. So they are given as models to be emulated. I don't know, I think it's rather stupid to imagine, but it's true that a sizable part of the European population wants their countries to function like two post-Soviet countries that are in civil war and that have strong political repression. I don't know why the governance structure of Ukraine or the governance structure of Moldova would be the envy of a country that is in NATO and in the EU, but for some strange reason, this is the world where we're living in. So, for example, Germany. In one of the sanctions packages against Russia, the one in June 2024 or 5, it included one of its own citizens. So a journalist from Berlin, Hussein Dogru, he was included because he was doing pro-Palestinian journalism. He was essentially advocating the Palestinian cause. And he was included in the sanctions list against Russian citizens, even though he's a German citizen living in Germany. And he's subject to everything that the Russians are not allowed to do in Germany, to work, to derive any sort of income, to own property, to all of these things, except that he's living there. So he has been put under a regime, and not even in a legal sense. So this was not the result of a court order. This was not the result of a trial. This was just an executive decision. He was put under a regime which was found in the Middle Ages, and legal scholars say that it is called civil death. So when you are banished from society, you are not dead, but your civil rights are no longer recognized. So let's say if somebody kills you, they don't get punished. If somebody steals from you, you do not have the right to redress. You do not have the right to claim that your property was stolen, because you do not have the right to property anymore. You do not have any of the rights that regular people have. You're not dead, but you might as well be. For the state, you do not exist as a subject anymore. So this is what happened to Hüseyin Doğru, a German citizen, German born. Okay, he has a Turkish name. Too bad. I thought we lived in the age of tolerance. German citizen. He has no other citizenship except the German one, and his assets were frozen. He's not allowed to work. He's not allowed to derive income. He's basically made to starve. And he also cannot receive help, because that would be an eludation of the sanctions. This would be breaking the sanctions regime if you help Hüseyin Doğru even by giving him food. So basically, Germany is equating a part of its citizenry, the one that does not follow the dictates coming from the government, as the enemy being Russia, as Annalena Baerbock used to say. So Germany also discusses outright the prohibition of its largest party. In the polls, the Alternative für Deutschland is the largest party, and it is openly discussed. It has already been deemed an extremist party, and it is put in a special registry and whatever, but there is a discussion in German society to outright ban it, because it reflects the interests of the majority of the population, which go against the current direction. And this is the democratic response. Ban them because they are undemocratic. If the majority of the population wants something that the current government is against, then the majority of the population is wrong. And democracy means to stomp on their will. Just like Ukraine, just like in Ukraine. The majority of the citizens of Ukraine were Russians, therefore their rights had to be stomped upon in order to grant the minority what it wished. So Germany functions in a similar fashion. And of course, the most insane of all is Romania. Because in Romania, this paradigm, this Ukrainian paradigm or Moldovan paradigm, this post-Soviet paradigm in general, about the fact that half the population does not agree with the narrative and half the population does not want to, integrate into the West and so on, this caught on in Romania, even though Romania is very different from Moldova and from Ukraine. Romania does not have a sizable Russian minority. Romania does not have a sizable pro-Russian minority like there is in Slovakia or in Bulgaria or in Serbia or in Hungary perhaps. In Romania you have no such thing. In Romania you just have half the population, which goes against the current direction. But there's no Russian connection there. It's not like in Ukraine that those people are Russian. So the Romanian state has gone on to persecute, slowly but surely, the majority of its population. This was very obvious during the vaccine crusade. More than half of the population did not take the vaccine, and the authorities had all sorts of initiatives of cracking down on this majority. And it's managed to make life horrible for a few months for the unvaccinated majority of the country. And when the war in Ukraine started, because there is a sizable majority which does not want to involve itself in the war, does not want Romania to become a part of the war, and does not want Romania to allocate resources for this war and so on, The authorities and the pro-Western elites and the NGO people, the National Endowment for Democracy, financed so-called civil society, have decided that Romania has to go on the Ukrainian model, in the sense that if half the country does not agree with the current direction, it means half the country are the Russians that we have to persecute. Okay, they do not speak Russian, but of course, if they disagree with the direction, then they must be influenced by Russia, right? Because how else could people decide on their own that they do not agree with the direction? There must be Russian brainwashing taking part. And taking the logic further, if this half of the society which does not want to go with the current thing is Russian inspired, then it means that the main voices from this opposition, be it political opposition, media opposition, influencers, and so on, they are also paid by the Kremlin, right? I mean, obviously. So they used this logic and they believed it to such an extent that they are starting to institutionalize it. So there's this assassination list, just like there is in Ukraine the Mirotvorets and the Chesno. There is also a Romanian one on which I prominently appear. I am the last addition to it. And even though you might think that this is made just by a group of enthusiast amateurs, those people, the founders of this organization that compiled the blacklist and that openly bragged that it's an assassination list, have received significant support from the Romanian state. They are being openly promoted by the Romanian state media. They are being openly promoted and even awarded by the Defense Ministry of Romania. And of course, I will not even mention the kind of support they have from the National Endowment for Democracy funded NGOs. So, okay, there it's blanket support, but this would have been expected. Actually, the most prominent member of this self-styled terrorist group received the prize for social dialogue in 2023 by this AstroTurf civil society organization that claims to enhance social dialogue in Romania. The guy openly touts about killing Russians and has made this assassination list of people that are undesirable, even though they are Romanians and Romanian citizens. And he is deemed a promoter of social dialogue. This is the insanity in Romania. And furthermore, the president of Romania 2 days ago organized this conference at the presidential palace, in which an NGO, but an NGO that will be institutionalized according to their own statements. So their program, their anti-disinformation program, is becoming official policy in Romania. This NGO openly presented the names and the faces of the most important voices of the opposition, be it political opposition or media opposition. So talk show hosts, anchors, TV anchors, influencers from the social networks, members of the European Parliament, university professors, all sorts of people from the political opposition, casually labeling them as Kremlin-controlled disinformation agents. So essentially, Romania is adopting this Ukrainian model, or this Moldovan model, in which they are persecuting half their population, or the Baltic model, by conflating them with some sort of undesirable ethnic group. So if the Baltic countries have this Russian minority, if Moldova has this Russian minority and this Russian-leaning other ethnic minorities like the Gagos and the Ukrainians in Moldova are also Russian-leaning. If Ukraine had this majority of the population being Ukrainian-speaking, the same is not true for Romania. So the people who are in the political opposition are not of a different color, they're not of a different religion, they're not of a different language, they're still Romanian. But somehow this governance, this apartheid type governance structure became very appealing for the Romanian authorities, and they want to go on this path of designating more than half of the population, so the part of the population that does not agree with them and that does not support them, to deem them as enemies of the state in a legal sense. In the sense that, just like Chesno, this NED and USAID website from Ukraine openly touts, there is a section of dead people on their website. And for each of them, there is a reason for the assassination, the reason being that they are traitors to the enemy. So Romania is embarking on this logic to consider more than half of its population to be somehow brainwashed by the enemy, and the people who represent openly the political opposition to be the voices of Russia, who was designated to be the enemy. So I don't know what the end point is regarding the domestic population of Romania. Will there be camps? Will there be like a gulag structure to put millions of people who have the wrong political convictions? How does this play out? Will the citizenship be withdrawn from the people who vote for sovereigntist parties, or now for the Social Democrats? How is this political repression going to be carried out, since it was officially recognized as such at the highest level of the state? So until now, until 2 days ago, the state could have had plausible deniability, could have said, yeah, okay, there are the people who made this Romanian mirotvoreți, but they're just private individuals. They do not represent the state. And even though they had support from the state, they were invited on national television, on national radio, they were promoted. Still, the organization and the website was not officially acknowledged by the Romanian state, and it was not officially promoted as such by the Romanian state. But 2 days ago, this changed, because apparently there is this initiative of tracking down disinformation disseminators in Romanian society, which is now an official project of the Romanian state. And the disinformation agents were labeled to be simply the figureheads of the opposition. So then, how likely is it to have free elections in 2028? How likely is it to be able to run for office as a member of the opposition when there's this conflation being made between opposing the government and being an enemy of the state? So essentially, if you oppose the current government, you are deemed an agent of the enemy and a traitor to the motherland. Okay. I'm very curious how this will unfold further, because unfortunately this segment of Romanian society, which has the power now and which constantly manages to convince a majority at the polls to put the stamp on them and to give them another 4 years in office, this segment of society that is in power is very radicalized, and it is willing to go so far. And this probably happens in no other European country, maybe not even in Germany. I'm not sure in Germany how big the divide is between the good citizens and the bad citizens. There's something there as well. I mean, I'm pretty sure people who vote for the German Green Party will have no hesitations putting the people who vote for the AfD in camps, because they definitely deem them bad citizens, bad Germans that need to be re-educated, and that have no human rights because they are fascists. But I'm not sure to which extent this also is applicable to members of the Social Democrats and to the Christian Democrats. So I hope that the majority of the political spectrum in Germany does not go on this route and does not deem half of society to be non-humans, to be such bad Germans that they should be deprived of human rights because they're not humans. But in Romania, the experience of the pandemic taught me that this class of people who hold power are so radicalized and are so willing to buy in on the narrative to its final conclusion that yeah, I'm afraid that they do not see the problem with such labeling, targeting, political persecution, and so on. There was no outcry when uh, Diana Shoshak was banned from running for president because of her geopolitical views. There was no outcry when the elections were annulled, so the majority of the political spectrum went with the official story. There was no outcry when Călin Georgescu was not allowed to run again. And I'm pretty sure there would be no outcry if a party like AUR, which is at 40% plus in the polls, would be banned because it is officially recognized at the level of the Romanian presidency that it is an agent of disinformation. So its most important figures, its members of parliament, its members of European Parliament, its most important spokespeople are designated officially by the state at the highest level to be agents of disinformation in the service of the Kremlin. So then, this is why I'm concerned that Romania does not understand how democracy works and how to effectively govern its population, because it is very tempted. The Romanian authorities are very tempted to designate the people who do not go along with the official narrative as simply not just domestic opposition, but the enemy in an ethnic sense, just like the countries who have a big Russian minority. And as we know, as we have learned, all people are equal except Russians and Palestinians, because they do not, they are not human and they do not have rights. Therefore, so there would be no problem with suppressing Russian speakers in the European Union, but apparently countries are now tempted to regard and to designate a part of their own citizenry as the other, the barbarian, the extramuros, the one from outside the citadel, from outside civilization, even though they speak the same language, they have the same religion and so on. So to designate a part of their own citizenry as public enemy, in the sense that it belongs to a different nation, not to the national project of the nation state itself, as if those people were the traitors that want to change allegiance to Russia. So this is what I wanted to draw your attention to. If you like what I do, like, share, subscribe. If you want to support me, you'll find a link in the channel description how to do so. And until next time, take care.